The Swiss Family Robinson, Chapter 20, Candle Making. When the boys rose next morning, they gave me no rest till I promised to attempt to make candles of the wax plant berries. We first filled a pan, which was one of the treasures saved from the wreck, with the berries and placed it over a fire. In little time, a considerable quantity of beautiful green wax was produced. This I carefully skimmed off into another vessel, and while the berries were melting, we prepared a number of wicks from threads of sailcloth. These we dipped quickly and carefully into the wax, and then we hung them in the air to harden. This operation was repeated several times, till the wicks had been taken sufficient wax to form candles. The same evening, one of them was placed in a clay socket and lighted on our supper table, and although they were far inferior in roundness and size to those at home, they threw around us such a clear, bright light that we were overjoyed with the results. Our success in this important matter encouraged me to make an attempt of another description. Among the articles on board ship we found no churn, and I therefore resolved to try to plan which I remembered was practiced by the Hottentots, who made butter by shaking cream in a skin. So a butter churn, it's when you make the butter, you have a barrel. So there were none on the ship. So now they have to figure out a way to make butter. I chose the largest of our gourd bottles and filled it half full of cream. Closing it tightly, I next placed 4 stakes firmly in the ground, tied to them a piece of sailcloth by the 4 corners, and laid the bottle upon it. At each of the 4 sides, I placed one of the boys and directed them to roll the vessel backwards and forwards by alternating raising the cloth in pairs so as to keep it in constant motion. This employment proved capital fun, and the boys kept it up with great mirth and laughter for much more than half an hour. I then opened the bottle and found to our great joy that some really good butter had been churned. My next work was much more difficult undertaking, and for a long time it seemed impracticable. The sledge was not only inconvenient, but very heavy for animals to draw. But as had brought 4 cartwheels from the wreck, I determined to try and construct a little cart, and after some difficulty succeeded in building a sort of carriage, which, though clumsy in appearance, would, I knew, be very useful to move our heavy objects. While I was thus employed, my wife and some of the boys went daily to Tent House to plant the European seeds which I had brought from the wreck. Also, I wished also to make the rocks at Tent House a kind of fortification, for all our ammunition lay there. I resolved to choose 2 slight elevations near the river on which to fix the 2 cannon from the pennants, and also to plant a thick hedge of Indian fig and other thorny plants of cactus around the whole spot. These operations employed us day after day for 6 weeks, but the hard work had completely worn out our clothes, for our wardrobe was scanty, and this, with other reasons, made me consider it advisable to return once more to the wreck. I wished, if possible, to bring some large chests and 1 or 2 more of the cannon to place in the heights of our fortification. Accordingly, on the first fine day, I set out with the pennants for the wreck with the 3 elder boys. We found everything almost as we had left it, but the wind and waves had done considerable damage. The sailors' chests were in fairly good condition, and these we placed on board the pennants, as well as quantity of powder and shot and 2 small cannon. On our next trip, we towed our tugboat behind the pennants and loaded it with planks, doors, window shutters, locks, and bolts, and as many of the other valuable things as we could possibly carry. In fact, we plundered the wreck of every useful article, and then resolved to blow the hull up with gunpowder, in the hope that the wind and waves would cast on shore planks and beams, as well as other articles suitable for house building, which were too bulky for us to move or bring away in our boats. I had noticed 4 large copper cauldrons, which I thought might be saved, and as they were too heavy to move, I attached to them several empty casks strong enough to support them when the ship broke up. When all was ready for our last voyage home, I placed a barrel of gunpowder in the hold of the ship, fastened the fuse to it carefully, and lighting it, sprang into the boat. The boys were already seated, and with outspread sail, we made towards the shore. We had scarcely reached Safety Bay when a mighty roar as of thunder resounded from the rocks, and at the same moment a brilliant column of fire and smoke shooting into the air announced that my plan had succeeded. A feeling of sadness came over us all. It seemed as if the last link that bound us to our dear home was broken, and that we had lost in the ship an old and trusted friend. Refreshed by a night's rest, which enabled us to shake off all feelings of regret, we hastened to the shore when we saw that the beach was strewn with planks and beams, whilst on the sea, but rather beyond our reach, floated broken fragments of all descriptions, and amongst them the copper cauldrons, buoyed up between the casks to which I had fastened them. Many days were employed in collecting all these useful articles, in piling them up on shore, and in placing the powder casks under the cauldrons, covering them with earth and moss, till we could store them properly at Tent House. My wife, after assisting us with the wreckage, made the agreeable discovery that 2 of our ducks and 1 of the geese had each hatched a brood, and she had seen them leading their noisy young families to the water. This reminded us that our domestic comforts at Falcon Nest, and we determined to leave the next morning for our shady summer home.